true culture at the same time.
Now, we talked about this on the show before, right? We've got fresh, that's a nice pound-and-a-half lobster, right?
Yeah.
And then, you know, we've got this is a...
Hi, I'm Erin Becker, Director of the Cambridge Art Association, and this is Creative Process. Creative Process is a monthly television show featuring the work of local artists who are telling their stories. This month, I would like to welcome local artists Suzy Marden and Tom Acevedo. Suzy and Tom were both recently featured Artists of the Week at the Cambridge Art Association. Welcome, Suzy and Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you, Erin.
Thanks for coming tonight. So Suzy, can you tell me a little bit about your first artistic memory?
Well, I think from the very beginning, I was constantly drawing. So I would probably come home from any kind of day at school when I was little, and the only thing I would talk about would be art. And of course, when I was growing up, it wasn't, well, like, where's the spelling bee or where's the science report? And it was just, it wasn't in the mix with me. So I was constantly drawing and always doing things that were somewhat visual. Like if I had to turn in a book report, it would be a drawing of the book report. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing. So.
Yeah. What about you, Tom?
I remember I used to stare at the knots in the floors and the stucco on the walls, and I'd see cityscapes and people and things like that. So my earliest was just visual, and then after that I was just, asking my dad to help me with drawings all the time. And after about second grade, I stopped asking him, and he kept wanting to help me draw,
Yeah.
and I was like, no, I got this. So like yourself, I was focusing my book reports on drawing and less writing, and you know, I think, you know, that left brain, right brain thing really kicked in then, because my writing skills totally went downhill, and I focused primarily on the fine arts.
Excellent. So you're both painters. When did you start painting? Whoever wants to go first.
Painting professionally or painting as a career?
No, just painting. I mean, if you
Artistically.
So artistically, you started out drawing,
Yeah.
which I think is the way most, you know, young people start sort of making art. But do you remember when you started painting?
Well, I was in school again. I was not academic at all, so I was always the one that they were calling out of the class to help paint the sets for the theater group or the chorus group and things like that. So that was, you know, really bad painting on huge butcher sheets of paper. But in college, I was studying illustration, and I knew I didn't want to do it, and I knew I wanted to paint. So I forced myself to paint, and I couldn't afford, nor did I have the time to take the classes that they were offering at Mass Art. So I just forced myself to paint, and for about a year, my teachers were getting really bad paintings that I was doing because I refused to draw. And so I just forced myself to paint until I picked it up.
How about you, Suzy?
Well, sort of similar. You know, first you're drawing and you're trying inks, and then I think that it's kind of like that frontier that as a person interested in arts you are afraid of, because it's a little bit out of control. It's not mastering it like you do drawing, and then, you know, so you enter into it, and then once you get into it, it's almost like, you know, there's this whole other component with painting, and definitely everything for me kind of happened in high school. That's when I was recognized as an artist. I won awards. You know, art really became mainstream for me, and painting was a big part of that. And I definitely felt like this is an unknown medium, but you know, when you're in it, you can't even like help yourself anymore. It's like you have to kind of try the sculpting and the painting. But painting for me is just something that it calls me. It's like you put down your first concept, and then, you know, it just keeps bringing you back in. And there's something that happens with layering and painting where something starts talking back to you, and it's different than any other form. I don't see that in two-dimensional art like I do when I'm painting. That really becomes much more alive. Painting is, you know, really.
Let's look at some of your
All
artwork.
right.
So we're just gonna scroll over
I think we're
here.
saying the same thing.
So this is one of Suzy's pieces called Limes, and do you want to talk a little bit more about this
process?
piece? Yeah, what the process
Well, my
is.
process.
What's your starting point?
I'm obviously an abstract painter, and this is some limes that I had seen sort of cut up on a cutting board, and you know, for me, I see everything very visually. Like, I problem solve visually. I'm just a very visual person, and I think that as an artist, a young artist, you kind of think, well, there's something wrong with you because you're not like sort of seeing the world like everybody else sees it, and then finally you kind of just with time and perspective, you just sort of you kind of go for it. And so I kind of capture things as I see them, and I see everything in movement. I see everything with a certain energy around it. So that was sliced limes, and there was a couple of strawberries on the cutting board, and that's how I interpreted it.
Is this a painting?
Yeah, it's a painting.
Oh wow, because it almost has a feeling of a woodblock print
Right,
or
people
something
say that,
like that.
yeah. Or an African print or something like that. But no, this is painting, and it's a lot of layers. And
How big is this in real life?
it's about 1.5 feet by 2 feet.
Okay.
No, actually, it's a little bigger than that. But I paint on maps, so these are all painted on maps, like road maps,
Fantastic.
that I gesso, and then I just do a lot of
Yes.
layers.
Another piece.
This is Simple Notes. This was done for Elena Ruhr, who is a leading female contemporary classical composer, and it was about her work, and she likes everything very simple on the surface so everybody can relate to it. And then her more complex compositions happen underneath the surface. So I was interpreting that, and this is just simple notes on the surface. People can relate to that. So
Fantastic. And one more. Tell us
this
about
is
piece.
also was done for an exhibit I did for Elena Ruhr, and this is sort of a montage of all the music education that she's had in her life from the time she was a baby, where she had a mother that was a folk singer and a father that was a mathematician, so she was exposed to all the great classical composers, Mozart, Beethoven, etc., and then as well as Dylan and Joni Mitchell, etc. So I kind of compiled all the flavors and colors and depth of her education in music, and called this Sheets, and this was actually sold at a recent concert that her compositions were being played.
Fantastic. Is this on
yeah.
paper or is it on
This is
canvas?
also on a map. These
It's
are
on
all
a
done on
map.
maps,
Oh,
right?
that's so cool.
So this is unframed. This was before it was finished, but this
Now,
piece was sold.
Do
at
you
that
find
concert.
that music heavily influences your work?
I
or-
definitely.
What do
I
you
think
listen to?
I love folk music. I listen to folk music and classical, and yeah, I see the synergy between the two, very closely linked. I think that it's really, it's about hearing and seeing and then working with your piece and getting it to come into its own voice. And when it starts talking back to me, I know it's done, and I let it go. But yeah, I think that
What do you mean when you say the piece talks back to you?
it starts having its own voice. I mean, I work with a template. There's some pieces on that I gave you, but
We'll look at some more
maybe
in a
harder, right?
Yeah.
So I start off with a composition, and then the composition starts to have its own identity, and I start to be able to see without any. I'm not overthinking. It's not like a labor, but it starts to show me. You know, it's interesting. You put a little bit down, and a little bit starts to return some information to you, and then you work together, and it keeps leading me towards. So my pieces go from looking one way, and then there's a couple of transitions in between the final piece, and it's pretty remarkable what happens in between. A lot of people say, "Why didn't you save that? Why didn't you do another one?" And but it has
That's
its
not the
own.
way it was
Yeah, it
meant
has
to
its
be.
own language. It really does. Would you
What's your-
agree?
I say, what's your response to that, Tom?
My response to that.
Well, do you feel so when you're making? I feel like that's sort of the magic of the creative process, especially for people who don't make art. Is how do you know when it's done, or what kind of dialogue is happening between you and the artwork as you're producing it? So, are you talking to your artwork? Is it talking back to you? Is
My
it
artwork
telling you
talks to
where
me,
it wants you to go?
A lot of times I try to come up with a concept, and I often say my concept is half the work, because I wanted to, having had that illustrative background, even though I didn't follow it, it was something in me that wants to tell a story, and I wish canvas could move for like 5 seconds like a movie, because I want it to tell a story. So I try to convey that story as best I can in a very literal manner. I'm an extremely literal painter. So sometimes the full concept is not realized. I have the positioning, I have how the actors I want in there, but it isn't until the idea is crystallized, and then it just screams at me, and then I could really get into the painting and give it the life that it needs. But it's usually not started with that crystalline idea. The concept is there, but and a lot of times it just comes down to a title. What's this title?
It's the hardest part.
You know, what's the title and that will work for this painting, and then bang.
Well, what's the title of this one?
That painting is Taking Inventory, and it's one of my earlier paintings. It's probably like the 4th painting I ever did.
Wow.
I didn't start painting until about 6 years ago. And on canvas, so that was about the 4th or 5th painting I did, and it was realized through my battling with addiction and recovery, and part of recovery is a 12-step program, and taking inventory is part of your recovery. So this is the deep soul searching of trying to find out what makes you tick.
I love that.
And I definitely do like working with planes, and I don't do it as often as I like, but this one was definitely the soul searching involved in looking inside yourself and taking inventory of what works and what doesn't work, throwing out what's broken and what's not, and making a fresh start. You know?
It's really great.
Thank you.
Let's see. We have a few others from Tom to look at. Let's talk about. I'm just going to pick out some
Yeah.
random ones. So,
That is called the Gentleman.
and is that you?
That is me. I am my cheapest model. By the way, and that painting was won grand prize in a not nationwide, worldwide competition
Fantastic.
with Art Fusion Gallery in Miami, and I won the grand prize. And that's called the Gentleman. And I use myself as a model quite often because I have the idea, I have the concept, and I don't have the models. Nor can I afford the models. And a lot of times I get a lot of people who want to model and then they don't show up. So I'm there. I got a camera, and I've got sheets. But most of the time I try to obscure my face.
Is that your super fancy chair?
That is my super fancy
That's a
chair. I picked it up for my
fantastic
18th
chair.
birthday. Yeah.
Wow.
But I try to hide my face a lot because I don't want people to think that I'm vain. It's not for vanity because it stops becoming me. You know, as soon as I start painting it, it becomes shapes. You know, each painting is just a myriad of shapes that comes together and makes a painting. But the actor is never me when I start painting on it.
Interesting. Now, how long would it take you to paint something like? And how big is this in real life?
That one is about, I think it's 20 by 28.
Okay.
And it was also the first gallery that I went to in Provincetown. I brought this painting with me just to sell myself. And they said, well, we'll hold on to it. And I took a walk through Provincetown. I came back and they said, we sold it. So I got into that gallery, Lyman Air Gallery in P-Town. So that was quite the coup for me. But those paintings usually take about a month.
Okay. And you were talking about having inspiration but not having the model. Where does your inspiration come from? I'm just going to switch back.
Each painting that I do, I try to, I ask myself, how can I improve somebody's life? And I know it sounds all hokey and full of me, but it truly is. I'm here to improve the quality of somebody's life. I truly believe that, and God has given me this ability to do this. So, how can I uplift someone? How can I tell a story that someone will go, that I understand that. So each painting that I do want to tell a story that will help somebody, and that's the motivating force. I don't like just doing a nude. I do primarily focus on the male figure, but I won't do just a nude laying there. It definitely has to have a story for me.
Excellent. And I know for you, a big part of the story is your recovery process.
That
it's
is
almost a form of therapy.
It is a huge part of all of my paintings is recovery, and the spirituality that's come from this. It's not only a recovery program, but it's a spiritual program where I get to open myself up to the sunlight of the spirit, so to speak.
I'll look at one more from Tom for the moment.
Yeah,
I know we were using this image to publicize the creative process, but also used in our Artist of the Week talk. So if you want to talk a little bit about
that one is a popular one, and it hasn't sold, ladies and gentlemen, so it's still for sale. People are really drawn to that, and people do use it as their sites and their invitations for shows and things like that. And it's been shown all around America, and It's called Allegory of the Cave 1, and somebody told me a really brief synopsis of the Allegory of the Cave, Socrates' story, and just like a 2-minute synopsis, and I was fascinated by it. And I went and looked it up online, and it just intrigued me. So this is, in my imagination, the first scene from Allegory of the Cave, where the prisoners are looking at the shadows that are reflected on the walls, but one says, wait a minute, this is not all there is. And he's starting to turn away, and the other prisoners who are normally just facing the wall are just like, yo, what are you doing, you know? But this guy just sees a light that is not of this world, you know, and decides to investigate. And yeah, that's me again.
Yeah. It's 3 of you. You turned
It is
into
3 of me.
triplets.
I tried to make my nose bigger in one of them too.
Oh yeah, say the one that doesn't really look like your profile, but yeah, that's fantastic. So Suzy, do you want to talk a little bit about your creative process? What inspires you every day? We know you listen to folk music, but
you know, that's just kind of part and parcel of it. I think, and I don't know if you'll agree with me or not. I don't know if I am looking for inspiration or is inspiration looking for me. I'm not sure what it is, because I don't think that's sort of like trying to find the needle in the haystack. For me, it's just I shut my eyes and I see things, you know, I go to bed, I shut my eyes, I see colors, I see paintings, I almost want to get out of bed. It's like a compulsion, isn't it? So when you're talking about addiction and recovery, it's like, I would say that you can't, even just in hindsight looking back, it's something that just was always there. And I think growing up in my generation, it was like, I think my father was like, well, where's like the science in you, or the math, or the you know, the explorer, whatever it is. But it was always art, and it wasn't exactly supported. It was, you know, you were kind of like this on the margin, and then you'd have to try to find another kind of job or career, which I did, and I was successful in other careers, but I was not fulfilled at all. I mean, you feel like an anomaly unless unless you just finally surrender. And so for me, it's just always there. I mean, I get on any given day, I'm on a street, I'm walking around in the city, and I see everything visually. I don't see it like, oh, how annoying this is, or the bad weather. I don't really see it like that. I see buildings and cityscapes and just people, the swipes of color things. And so it just keeps sort of recycling in me as art. And
when you have those thoughts when you're trying to fall
I
asleep,
have a little
do you
book.
write? Do you write
all the
things
time.
down?
Sweet.
Do you
I
take
am
pictures with
always-
your phone? Or?
Sometimes I do that. Yep. And yeah, it's kind of full time.
Constant.
It definitely is.
So I don't know as if I'm inspired and I was on a nature walk and I got inspired. I don't think it's really like that. It's just I'm always looking at things kind of artfully, and then trying to interpret it, and I might remember some things, and then it's really frustrating if you don't have something to draw it down with. It's like, there goes that moment. But there's always another.
There's always another. There's
Yeah.
always more inspiration, and you know if it was meant to be,
Yeah.
and come back around.
And I think once you start to get into that surrendering to it, you do better art. You know, you're not self-guessing or self-doubting all the
We're
time.
trying to sell to somebody. you know,
Exactly.
like, who will enjoy this painting?
No, this
Chasing the
becomes
money.
second.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. I think that really interferes with
It does interfere.
being able to produce something worthy, because it's a juxtaposition that just doesn't allow you to go down the rabbit hole.
Do you ever experience artist block?
Not anymore.
No.
I used to.
When you did, how did you overcome that? Like, what was the process?
I just think that you hit this wall where like 3 weeks went by and then 3 months go by and you haven't produced one thing that's good. And I think hopefully you wind up kind of learning more about yourself, which is, you know, it's like an onion. There's layers that have to come off in order to be a good artist. And I think when you're young, you know, if you're really not self-conscious, then you can start producing art really at a level that's pretty satisfactory and gets attention. But if you're riddled with stuff, like I certainly was, it took me a long time, and the onion layers just come off, and then you start hopefully arriving at a place where you just trust yourself a lot more. So I don't walk around thinking, am I going to be able to produce something good? I kind of know I'm going to. And it isn't about what other people think anymore either. So it just stands on its own. It has its own voice, and it's you know when it's complete, because it's really talking back to you. It becomes like this partnership where the art really takes on its own personality and has a has a leadership role in this relationship of painter and art, and so you step back and you really let it have its breath, and it starts to give you some information, and it really works that way. And I think once you start trying to get in there and have opinions and second guessing and thinking, will this sell or will people like it, it's not really art anymore to me. It's really something that's subject to opinion, and that's not organic or natural in its arrival.
Yeah.
So I think we're interpreters, really, just interpreters of experience.
The artist as interpreter.
And of experience, and couple that with nuance, experience and nuance. And I think when they come together, it's like, wow, it really works on this visual level. But then when you talk to somebody about what was going on at the time, what led you there, it becomes something that has depth. And so it can be powerful, and people really can benefit from the information, and then also just from the visual. So it's really good work when it, when you're operating at that level where people connect.
Yeah, well, it's sort of, so there's a 1962 essay by James Baldwin called The Creative Process, and we've talked about that before our interview started, and that's part of what he talks about a lot is, the artist is the person who holds the mirror up to society and sort of reveals certain truths, and I think that's part of what you're talking about. Is,
you just said it a lot better, though.
Yeah. But it is. I think that that's what I've seen over time is that the role of the artist, it can be a lonely one, but it's to sort of express what maybe cannot be expressed in words. I know a lot of your subject matter deals with a lot of different issues that exist in this world, and personal issues, global issues. We can probably flip back to this, and then I want to talk a little bit about your other career in the arts. But let's talk about The Visitor.
Sure.
You
were talking about you were talking about the that article that you had talked about, and how we show the underbelly of society or of ourselves, or shine the mirror,
or the painful things that people don't feel comfortable talking about.
But I mean, it was we had talked about how that article was written in the '60s, and I think humanity, or maybe it's just and you can say it differently. Artists may be in touch. The people that I know and hang with, they all are looking, they're all lifting up the mucky leaves to see what's going on, and again, most of my friends are in program or artists, so that's our job. Our job is to look closely at what's making us tick and what's making us act in a certain way and what's creating pain for ourselves and then others.
I think we like to poke the pig.
We like to poke the pig. So as you had used, peeling back the layers of the onion is a really great AA expression where you peel back the onions of the layer to see what made you do this. And we are the manufacturers of our own miseries, another expression.
That's universal, I think, too.
So this painting, though, is in response to, I had been doing shows to the public at the open studios in SoWa every first Friday.
Okay.
And I had been showing it at a male figurative gallery in Provincetown, and I had been submitting to male figurative galleries, and got published in a male figurative coffee table book, and I never had dealt with the public where they don't know what they're getting. And they would come into the studio and then they would turn around and they were afraid to see something that was not copaesthetic, it was not kosher. And I asked somebody once, and they said, I said, what's up? Why are you guys tittering? There was lots of tittering, and there's no male nudity where anything is showing that's obscene. It's all, this is the most nude you're gonna get. And they said, well, it's awful, it's terribly gay. And I took offense. I mean, I'm a gay artist, but I don't think I produce gay art. I try to show the underbelly or the subconscious of people and what makes them tick. And this was the first painting I did in response to showing at these open studios, and the public's response and reception to the male figure in contemporary art. And I somewhat get heated about it because it does bother me that a lot of mainstream galleries will not even look at my artwork.
Well, that could be Boston.
Yeah, no, it's states, it's country, our country.
I'm surprised.
And unless you are applying to a figurative show.
When you look at different retrospectives of galleries, you see a lot of, I'm just going to scroll back. There's very, very big spectrum of art that's being represented, and I'm surprised that you're having trouble.
It's more than not, you know. So those paintings were in response to the public's opinion or response to the male figure, and you know it. I did a story that was published in the Boston Spirit magazine just about that very thing, and it was. You know, you can't pinpoint it to one thing. It's an ebb and flow thing. You know, the great, you know, the statues of David and you know, all of these paintings. You know, would they be conceived now in that manner if they were painted now? And so I took classical paintings and then repurposed them or repainted them in a contemporary manner with reflective glass. So
Oh, that's very
people,
cool.
so people, you could see the response of people in looking at the paintings. So they're a lot of fun to do, and I continued the series. There's 4 paintings in that series. So.
Very cool.
Yeah.
We only have about a minute and a half left, so
sorry, Suzy.
I want to show a few more of
quite all right.
Suzies pieces. What's this one
I
called?
love that one.
Sky.
Yeah, this was called Sky, and this was, believe it or not, it sounds really complicated, but it's so simple. There was a big rain shower, and there was a raindrop inside of, like a rubber leaf of a beech tree, and inside that you could see like all these colors from the rain, like, you know, when the sun comes back out, and then there's blue, and there's like this orangey sort of, you know, kind of layer between that, and then the sun breaking out, and it was just, and then this sort of dark kind of underlying dark rain pool. Anyway, so this next one that you're going to hit, that was the middle stage of 3 series. The next one is what the finished painting was. And when people saw that, when I showed this to them before I finished it, they said, I love it, I love it. I said, but it's not done. And they said, no, it's done. But it wasn't done. And so the next image is actually the finished piece, which is very different.
Just because we have to wrap this up, Suzy, if they want to see more of your artwork, where can they find your artwork?
Suzy Marden art.com, and I am also reachable by suzy.marden, MARDEN, @gmail.com.
Fantastic. And Tom, if visitors want to see more.